Okay, that last piece of the reading, I always had a problem with because I didn't understand it until one day I read a commentary on it, and it makes all the sense in the world. But not being a person, I don't do kitchen. Okay, I don't do kitchen. I know where the forks and knives are, but that's about it. I don't cook. I can pour milk and I can pour juice, but that's about it. So what he's talking about, Jesus is talking about, he's talking to people who are agrarian farmers. Maybe they just came in from the market, and when they buy things like grain or flour, they often open up their garment and they put it in there. Okay, sometimes they wore something that they could wrap, so they would fill their garment up with flour or whatever, bundle it up and take it home. So, and you're nodding. That happened in your country? So Jesus is saying that's how love will be. You know, if you pour love into life, it'll spill out. It'll go all over, and that's what we want. But if you're stingy and you pack it down so nothing spills out, then what are you doing? You're holding back your love from others. Okay, that's a little metaphor that Jesus gave us to help us understand. Today's the feast of St. Peter Claver, and I think the readings, once I get them back up on your, yeah, I lost them, but I know where they are. Okay, thank you. Peter Claver, 1600s, was a Jesuit from Spain who was encouraged by his spiritual director to go to Colombia, South America. And there, the King of Spain had already, this is odd, given permission for explorers to go to Africa, Congo, and grab people and use them as slaves. And they brought them to Colombia in slave ships. You can't imagine how disastrous those ships, I can't imagine, I could read about them, and we all can read about them, how those slave ships were packed. Recently, Jerry asked me to go shopping, and he asked me to buy, the anchovies, okay? And I opened it, we made Caesar salad, it was very good, by the way. We opened the can of anchovies, because I don't do that too often, and you see these little fish, they don't even look like fish, but they're packed together, they're solid. Then you take the top off and you split them up. That is how the slaves were packed. These are people packed into these ships, into the bottom sections of the ships, tied down or chained down, probably with no covering. And just think of their bodily behaviors, the smell, the stench, the hunger, that when those slave ships came from Africa to Colombia, many of them, a third of them, were usually dead. Now think of that in reference to those who are surviving on those ships, how disastrous that must have been. And again, these are people. You say slaves, but you forget, these are people. Imagine the memories of these people who came over from their own homeland, grabbed, stolen, packed into ships, and came to the Americas next to people who were dead, full of their own excrement, tied and starving. Just if you just think of one of them, we can get the picture. If you think of a group, see, we get caught up in numbers and labels, but if you think of just one slave, and think of if that slave was you, how would you feel? What kind of anger, what kind of confusion would be going through your head? Now, when these slaves arrived at Cartagena, Peter Claver, who was a Jesuit from Spain, saw this and was astounded. Now, the Pope, Leo XIII, had already condemned slavery, but the Pope's voice in the secular world wasn't too popular. The Pope's voice in a Catholic world, which was Spain, wasn't too popular because money was more important than prayers. And the people in Spain who invested in this slave trade made a lot of money. Again, I want to use the word slave because that's what they were, but these are people. So those who invested and bought people who happened to be from Africa made a lot of money because they didn't pay them at all. They kept them indentured. Peter Claver saw this and his heart was moved beyond his imagination. He was educated. He was a Jesuit-educated priest. So he went there. He started ministering to the slaves, taking care of them. In his enthusiasm, and it's a sign of the times as well, his main concern was their bodily conditions, but also their souls. So besides catering to them, washing them, helping them, he also wanted to baptize them. And supposedly, in his lifetime, baptized like 300,000 slaves. You know, that's important for us who are Catholic and we understand the role of faith in our lives. But faith builds on nature. That's an old theological foundation. So faith has to be built on the nature of the people you're serving. And that's why in modern day ministry work or missionary work, you feed the people first. You help them put in water machines. You help them put in tunnels and wells. You help them learn how to seed and plant seeds and so on. That's the way missionaries today work. They house them first. And then in their action, the person they're helping sees that. So then the faith is being influenced and the person's nature is being respected, and you share faith on top of that. Baptism, confession, the Eucharist, the value of Christ in our lives. But without helping the person, action, faith is useless. St. James tells us that left and right in his letters. So Peter Claver took that very seriously. He called himself the slave to the slaves. When he went to the farmlands, and there was one guy, landowners had no respect for him. He was a pain in the neck. He was always around, helping these people, and it wasn't his business as far as they're concerned. We own them. Just that concept must go through your head when you hear that. And yet he did. He ministered to them. And at the end of the day, instead of going back to the quarters that the church provided him, he stayed there with the slaves. He lived in their hovels. And I say hovels because I'm sure they weren't, well-to-do, well-appointed homes. He stayed with them. He lived with them. He ministered to them for many years. Eventually he died of illnesses that he probably caught in all that action. And in his death, it was a very painful death, he really focused on his ministry as being a slave to the slaves, which is so Christ-like. Christ tells us how to deal with the enemy. And we all love people who love us. That's easy, he says. But love someone you don't love. Love someone you don't like. That's the Christian way. And that's a pain in the neck. And Jesus is a pain in the neck, often. We know that. But he is God, and he knows what's best for us through his ministry and his words. The readings of Scripture tell us how to love one another, how to be kind, how to avoid jealousy and envy and prejudice. And that all comes up to love. And what is love? Simply said, even philosophically, it's wanting the best for the other person, the beloved. Whether it's your husband or wife, your children, your neighbor, the stranger, wanting the best for that person. And you can want and therefore do and work toward it. You can't control the other person, although people try to control other people. And that's what the whole root of slavery is all about, I think, controlling people. So today we honor Peter Claver because he gives us such a hands-on example. Now he's famous in Colombia. The cathedral is dedicated to him. He's buried under the cathedral. But in his time, he was not well respected. He was a pain in the neck. Told people how to take care of these people who were brought over from Africa. Really focused his life on caring, cleaning them. I mean, just think of just one. I don't care who it is, even yourself. Caught in the bowels of a ship, chained down, and who knows how many months or days it took for the ships to come from Africa to Colombia. And then eventually the slavery went up the coast, and that's one of our dark chapters of American history, the fact that slavery came to our shores and we profited from it, which it's heartbreaking, but we profited from it. So yes, we hear Black Lives Matter. Of course, all lives matter. And I'm not interested in the political aspects of that phrase. I'm interested in the Christian aspect of that phrase. God made us. We're made in His image. I don't care what color you are, what language we speak, what our heritage is. God created us in His image, and it's our task to love the person who suffers the most. And we're here in CABINI Church, and there's a little statue of CABINI behind me. And last night I was at the unveiling of eventually what will be a great movie on Mother CABINI, and I'll keep you posted on that when it comes out. But she was sent by that same Pope, Leo XIII, here to the United States. She wanted to be a missionary in China. He said, no, go west. To mission to the Italian immigrants in downtown New York, Brooklyn, Hoboken, Newark, New Orleans, California, Colorado. She went to all these places in the 1800s. But she was doing the same thing Claver was doing, going down to the bowels of the poverty that was there. And then she realized that she's ministering to people, so they didn't have to be Italian. She ministered to Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, African American. She ministered to all of them, raising up the dignity. What was she doing? She was loving. She was putting Christ's word into action. We have so many examples of how to love. But we as people so often, me. And we as people so often say, oh, what am I getting out of it? How do they love me? To hell with that. Because our job is not to be self-consumed, that we're egotistically in love with ourselves. But if you love yourself, even a little bit, good. Because that's how you have to love the stranger. So whatever you care for yourself, and if you don't care for yourself, you're in trouble, I'll give you a card, you come to therapy, we gotta work on that. But how you care for yourself is how Jesus is telling us, care for the stranger, especially those who really, really need it. St. Peter Claver is the patron of love, I think, in many ways, and we ask him to intervene for us and give us an example of how to love even that person who is down in the streets.